And these two guys are straight up basketball bullies, just pushing people, wills, game plans all over the basketball court. Draymond conceptually could be named the Defensive Player of the Year every year that he's been in the league. There is nobody who offers his head coach more defensive versatility. I can pick up your center. I can pick up your point guard at 90 feet. Who else can do that? The bullies are in town. Draymond and Jimmy Butler, I think, were at their most Draymond-y and Butler-ish last night, right? Yeah. They were exactly who they need to be for this team to really go somewhere with consequences attached to it. Jimmy Butler has an ability to be the alpha dog offensively, and that's on a night where Steph Curry is on the floor. Now, obviously, Curry wasn't on the floor, so there was a grand invitation for Jimmy to become that. And in the fourth quarter, he did. He put the entire offensive game plan on his back, and he just said, I'm going to the rim. I'm going to make the right decision. I'll kick out to Pajemski, who just hit, two of his biggest threes in his young career last night to seal that game. It was awesome level Jimmy. From the free throw line, getting it done, where Jimmy didn't get it done from the free throw line the night before. It felt like just everybody got the message that games like that can't happen anymore. Whether Steph is playing or not, no matter who's playing for the other team, it is March. We are trying to do something. We cannot have nights off like that. There is no more, burn the tape. Those games happen. No, not at this point in the year. They don't. Not for good teams that are going places. So it was really good to see the best of Jimmy offensively. And
absolutely. And just to provide some perspective here, Jimmy Butler, when the trade happened, and I'm looking at the schedule now, so I have all my facts right. Jimmy Butler's first game was on Saturday, February 8th at Chicago. And the Warriors at that point, it's crazy how much the script is flipped from February 8th to now, because the Warriors were 25-26 when they acquired Jimmy Butler. They're now 40-29. Very important to note that one of those losses Jimmy didn't play in. And early in the Jimmy Butler experience with the Golden State Warriors, I'm sure you remember this game, Damon. 3 games in, they lost that ridiculously, you could say rigged, and I'd believe you, game at Dallas. We all remember that. The refs were literally handing the fans their flowers to make them feel better about Luka. But the way they responded the very next day.
also played his off that night.
That too, yeah. Yes. But the way they responded the very next night, they had a back-to-back the next night in Houston. And this was right before the All-Star break. And normally this team would have just said, you know what, we're aging. I don't think they're in denial about their age. And, let's just move on and forget. No, they came out with a fervor, with a vengeance, and they beat Houston in Houston because, again, that's what great teams do. They don't get on losing streaks. They don't let losses fester. And they took care of business. They righted the ship, and they did the same thing last night. Jimmy Butler, dude, he's exceeding the wildest dreams imaginable. They're now 15-2 when he plays. And I don't know if you agree with ESPN yesterday had a whole panel discussion on NBA Today about who the second best team in the Western Conference is. And you now have panelists, again, for what that's worth, but you now have national media panelists calling the Warriors the second best team in the West. And I do think OKC is beatable.
Here's the thing. They're in a conversation that 6 weeks ago, they weren't even involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
So, that's the big turnaround. And Jimmy Butler, I don't know if he is the best other guy, I'm not willing to define him in any other way other than like the playoff Jimmy that you used to see is the guy that basically has showed up since the trade. This basically is playoff Jimmy. And when you get a playoff Jimmy, what you're saying is we got a player on the court who's a force of nature. Jimmy Butler is a force of nature. And that brings me to the reigning king force of nature of the Golden State Warriors, and that's Draymond Green. And the two of these guys, with very little fanfare of the two of them and their personalities and their toxic traits and their best trait, like there has not been an awful lot of let's talk about Jimmy and Draymond together. That is a force of nature that I don't know the NBA is really ready for come playoff time. I mean, this is, how do the Warriors shock the whole world and win the NBA title? Okay, Steph is unconscious, and these two guys are straight up basketball bullies, just pushing people, wills, game plans all over the basketball court. And that is what I want to talk about here and now, because if there were a channel that only showed the matchup of Draymond and Giannis last night, and you didn't even see any other player on the court, I would have watched that. What a matchup Draymond and Giannis were last night. First of all, the both of them are outstanding players in two totally different bodies with completely different skill sets and personalities, yet almost the same ability to affect the game. Defensively, Giannis is a freaking monster. He is immovable. He is too strong. Unless he runs into Draymond Green, who figures out a way to move him and just get that elbow in the chicken wing and just put out just a little bit. And is that a foul? Is that a little dirty? That's just fucking NBA basketball in March, baby. But if defensive versatility and disrupting game plans were the two biggest moving talking points in who gets Defensive Player of the Year, in the way that Michael Jordan could have been named MVP every year that he was in the league.
Yes.
Draymond conceptually could be named Defensive Player of the Year every year that he's been in the league. Now, look, there have been years where Draymond has been not locked in and not at his best and kind of disruptive and destructive. And we all know the complicated story of Draymond Green. But when locked in, when playing, there is nobody who offers his head coach more defensive versatility. I can pick up your center. I can pick up your point guard at 90 feet. Who else can do that? Who else can do that in this league?
No one. No one, David. First of all, this much Draymond and Jimmy Butler discussion, I feel, commands an oi, oi, oi.
Hey.
I'm like feasting. Thank you. It was bubbling inside me. I mean, you can't talk about those two. You're absolutely right. They're bullies. They're menaces. One of the many reasons why I love the game of basketball is because the mental warfare aspect of it bears a lot of relevancy. And it's a huge reason why, as much as I love analytics, and I do feel like it has a role depending on the situation and the circumstance. I don't view basketball the way I view baseball in terms of the money ball stuff being applicable. And there's no analysis for mental strength in basketball, yet it's such a vitally important variable. Draymond Green is a perfect example of that. And when it comes to Defensive Player of the Year, I'm glad you brought this up because I've been a massive critic of the award system in the NBA for a lot of years. Case in point, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, fourth largest media market in the country. Some people will say Dallas. No, it is the San Francisco Bay Area. Actually, do your research.
It flips every couple of years. It depends who moved to what place, but yeah, every few years it changes.
It does. And I always stick with debate with SF as 4 simply because when you factor in the money and influence, we're beating Dallas. So anyways, the point is, it's the fourth largest media market, yet we have altogether one vote when it comes to media voting. And the NBA has set it up where, and I'm sure you know this, but I don't know if the audience knows this, where the San Francisco Chronicle and the Mercury News, they alternate each year with one vote. And depending on which organization it is on the year, I don't know which one gets even and odd, but their editors then decide who gets to get that vote. It's absurd. There's no transparency. There's a lack of representation. And I bring this up because with Draymond Green, the fact that he only has one Defensive Player of the Year award and Rudy Gobert has 4 exposes the ignorance of this whole award process, exposes the fact that Kendrick Perkins has a vote. That's absurd to me, man. Like, that dude has zero journalistic experience, zero media experience.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I think that I honestly don't think media should almost be even involved in these postseason awards, given the fact that the awards are directly tied to levels of income.
It is crazy.
You should not have, if you're first team all NBA, you start getting eligible for Supermax in ways that guys who don't get that aren't. So
yeah.
I think almost the media needs to. It should be. It should be NBA head coaches voting on these. NBA head coaches should vote on Defensive Player of the Year because they're the ones who understand NBA defense. They're the ones who understand the guys that they're game planning against each and every night. And I don't think you'd find too many coaches who would tell you that Rudy Gobert is bad at anything. Rudy Gobert is a very good defensive center. Let's not pretend.
Sir. Yes, sir.
But the minute he has to pick up the guard on a switch, that's when you beat the team that Rudy Gobert is playing for.
Not to mention, Rudy Gobert can't even guard the best big in the game, Nikola Jokic, who owns
not a lot
him.
of guys can. I mean, I'll give him that.
But 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and so that's insane to me. Draymond Green deserves way more than just one. I've gone on a lot of rants about that because it's completely absurd.
To properly frame Draymond's career, only letting him leave the league with 1 Defensive Player of the Year award is comically detached from the last decade and a half of basketball we just watched.
Easily. It reminds me a lot of Kobe Bryant. Like, Kobe Bryant only has 1 MVP, which is equally absurd to me. But again, this is where your point is confirmed in that maybe the media should not be handling this because the media and Kobe did not have the greatest relationship, and they penalized them for that with MVP awards. And I feel like Draymond Green is in a similar situation where he's being penalized. Like this season, for example, I do think he should win Defensive Player of the Year, especially with the Warriors now being relevant again.
He knows he may not have the raw numbers to qualify for this. He knows that the overall defensive net rating of the Warriors might not be sexy enough to really get him over the hump for this. So what he's saying is there's so much more than can be measured. And if defensive versatility were a part of the conversation, how can I be out of it?
Well, and
he's right about that. And then what he also said, and this is the big factor, is since Victor Wembanyama is out of the conversation, that opens it up for the field now. And I am more than just a guy in the field. I am at the front of the field behind Victor Wembanyama, who, again, look, if you're going to average 6 blocks a game, like, here's your trophy, dude. I mean, like, there you go. But Draymond, this run that the Warriors are on right now, the absence of Wembanyama, and just the hot, fresh memory of just him grinding into the hip of Giannis for 40 minutes last night. I mean, I'm not ready to take my case to the Supreme Court to make the argument, but on the steps of the court, I'll be like, hey, it could be Draymond's. Let's just think about it for a minute. But yeah, I mean,
there's also Damon, when it comes to NBA defense, there's no specific measurable that indicates who is the best at this, right? Like you can measure steals, right? But you also have a lot of players who routinely record high numbers of steals, yet they're exposed defensively in a lot of other measures. Like I hate to call out Stephen Curry's defense because I actually think he's a fantastic defensive player, but he's not the best defensive player. And I think 2 seasons ago,
he's an acceptable defensive presence.
He's acceptable. And the reason why I bring him up is because defensive rating is a stat that some people turn to. And I threw that, I crumpled that up metaphorically and threw it away because Stephen Curry led all guards in defensive rating just 2 years ago. Again, fantastic defensive player, not the best among all guards, though. That's absurd. Yet defensive rating said that he was the best guard. So I don't look at that stat. There's no one stat. It's hard to really rely on measurables. It is an eye test award, I think. And Draymond this year, I don't know how you cannot give it to him when he's the only guy in the NBA who can lock down 1 through 5. There's no one else.
Thanks for watching. Tune into the Damon Bruce Show live on YouTube every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific.